And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Berardelli, Ross Galloway here. Ross, once again, we do show prep. I put a bunch of titles up on the show, and we're going to talk about absolutely nothing in what we have here that we were going to talk about.
Well, at least I'm hoping this show goes a little more smoother than last week's. I heard Gene was going to fly this show like an all-female Delta Air flight crew this time around.
Did you ever hear? Oh, Jesus Christ! Did you ever hear? Oh, not here. Did you ever see? There's a movie with Kelsey Grammer, and he's like a captain of a submarine. I forget what it's called. But he has like a radio communications guy that always is getting electrocuted because the wires don't reach, and he's got to do different things. So right now, I got my shoe off, and I have one wire between my toes on my right foot. I'm holding on to two other wires here with both hands, and I'm getting shocked trying to keep everything going right now. But yeah, turn it
flow, man. We got 58 minutes left.
Calm down. We're gonna make it through this together. But yeah, it turned out to be a loose wire. I am now scared to death of touching my microphone. I hope I'm coming through loud and clear to everyone out there. But yeah, we got through it, and the clip didn't come out that bad, thank goodness, thanks to some creative editing. And I'm very happy with how that show turned out. It's actually, listen, strength through adversity right there. I think we came out a little more battle-tested here behind enemy lines.
Yeah, and I got to tip my hat to you. I've been hearing rumors that our numbers ain't looking too bad.
Bro, I don't know what's going on in the world, but people are finding the show in droves. Our last short video from last Friday is over 200,000 views. It's the most viewed show in the history of the channel. And I also cross-post across a lot of different platforms, like Facebook, like Instagram, like Getter, and other platforms. The last two short videos we've done in the past, let's say 12 days, over 1 million total views across different platforms. And here on YouTube, where we're currently broadcasting, so we have like our hub, over 300 new subscribers at this point, another 400 new subscribers on Instagram. It's crazy right now. We're doing really well.
Yeah, man, kudos. You're killing it, bro. Very good.
Well, I'm giving credit to the Galloway effect here. I think once you get a good firebrand on a good political show, it brings in the people. Galloway,
bro, half those platforms you rattled off, I have no idea what they even are.
Oh, you're not even on them. You're not even on them. Getter is one of those alternative platforms to Twitter, now that it's called X, that people are trying to make the next Twitter. That was one of them that we ended up getting quite a following on. But our short videos over there average about 10 to 12,000 views weekly, which is really cool. And of course, Instagram, Facebook, you know about them. Even you know about them.
I've heard of them.
You've heard. Yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. Well, listen, like I said, we had a great show planned for you, but I think we have an even better one that we're going to deliver to you. Especially if you're following the news today, dealing with the People's Republic of New York, and the federal government, and of course our president, Trump II, in his second term here. Do we call him King Trump II, or what do we do here?
I mean, I was like pushing for Trump 2028, but now, fuck it, man, Trump for king. Like that's what I'm going for.
You know what we're talking about here? We're going to be talking a lot about the People's Republic of New York and Kathy Hochul and all that. But there's the picture she held up at a press conference that we're going to be talking about. Yes, Trump posted on Truth Social, I believe it was, that he and his administration had killed congestion pricing, and therefore long live the king. And that picture was circulating. He's really trolling. I mean, it's a Jedi master level trolling. I had a friend from Arizona hit me up and say, "What the hell is this?" And I had to explain to him what vendetta is, and I had to explain to him what trolling is.
Yeah, and you know, the Italians, we call it vendetta, but Trump, you know, he wasn't going to run on vengeance, but I'm feeling the vengeance, and I got to apologize to all the people that are watching or listening. This is going to be a little bit of a New York centric show. We're going to talk about other things too. I escaped New York, as many of you know. My poor friend, Mr. Berardelli, is still in the belly of the beast over there. But I appreciate dunking on that S-hole place, otherwise known as New York, any chance I get. So this is going to be a great time for all involved.
You know, I had to think for a second, S-hole and not A-hole, and where you were going with that, but I was like, oh, right, that one. Um, yes, let the
New
record
York is
reflect,
like,
by the way. Let the record reflect, by the way, that I do live in a Republican county in the People's Republic of New York. I got out of
yeah.
the city, at least.
So a Republican county in New York is like a Democrat county in any other part of the country. Trash for the most part. And by the way, S
Fuck your
hole.
couch, all right? Fuck
Did
your
you
couch.
forget about S hole? I would put New York City on par. I wouldn't even say a hair better, on par with Haiti, right? If you want to like get down to it. S hole.
My God. All right, well, let's get to the crux of what we're talking about here. The Trump administration, through the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, has canceled the agreement that the previous administration had made to allow the People's Republic of New York City to do congestion pricing. For those of you who don't know what congestion pricing is, traveling into Manhattan, the island that people consider New York City, costs $9 just to set foot in it if you drive in below 60th Street. And if you drive below 60th Street, even if you're on the island, you get dinged up as well. This was all done and allowed through something that we discussed on the show previously, Mr. Galloway, and that is the federal power delegated to them concerning interstate commerce. New York City couldn't have done this on their own. New York State couldn't have done it on their own. They needed permission from the federal government because charging people to drive onto the island of Manhattan affects interstate commerce.
100%. And there was also federal environmental impact studies that were waived during the previous administration that could have been brought back through the EPA, which would have been super delicious that a Republican administration would have enforced environmental protocols on a Democratic state for something as stupid as congestion pricing. Like that would have been even better. But I can live with the way it turned out now. I know we have some clips of this witch. I'll use the W word.
Well, yeah, no, but well, listen, I'm gonna be calling her a lot of names myself here, pal. But before we do that, I do want to set the stage as to the basis for the Trump administration canceling, essentially, some say killing, but I don't like saying that on YouTube, ending congestion pricing. So let me share my screen here. You should be looking at a letter on the screen right now, my pal. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is from the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, directed to Kathy Hochul, Governor of New York. I am writing to you concerning the Federal Highway Administration's approval of the Central Business District Tolling Program, which is a pilot under the Value Pricing Pilot Program. You see how bureaucracy is just layer upon layer upon layer? It's the Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, and this program, which is a pilot under another program. That's how many layers of government you have to get through. So back in November of 2024, Federal Highway Administration and New York State Department of Transportation executed an agreement approving for this central business district, the zone where the congestion pricing has been occurring. The VPPP is an exception to the general rule prohibiting tolling on highways. Congress approved the VPPP exception in 1991 as a pilot to test congestion reduction techniques. New York is one of 15 states authorized to do the program. Pursuant to the agreement, Federal Highway Administration approved New York State DOT's implementation of the congestion pricing plan under the pilot. New York State DOT sponsors, Tribal Bridge Tunnel Authority, all these different agencies were authorized to implement a method of congestion pricing known as cordon pricing, which basically means that certain vehicles are charged tolls upon entry into parts of Manhattan south of 60th Street, which includes the business district, it includes Times Square, it includes a lot of tourist locations, the Empire State Building, all of Battery Park and downtown. For me, it affects me going to court. I would have to pay if I'm driving in $9 just to go to court. So Donald Trump took office, and upon assuming the responsibilities of the Office of Secretary of Transportation, President Trump asked Secretary Duffy to review the approval of this congestion pricing area. And let me get to the reasons why on page 3 here, why congestion pricing is now being deemed ineligible for this VPPP program. There's two reasons. First, the congestion pricing in the People's Republic of New York City uses a method of tolling known as cordon pricing, under which drivers who enter Manhattan are charged tolls no matter what roads they use. Under this form of tolling, they typically provide a no-toll free option for drivers who want or need to travel by vehicle into this area. The cordon pricing, or this congestion pricing area in New York, does not have one of these no-toll options incorporated within it. Basically, once you set foot south of 60th, you're in and you got to pay. So that's one reason why. The second reason why, and I'm going to let you talk because I know I'm talking a lot here, pal, is the imposition of tolls under this pilot program appears to be driven primarily by the need to raise revenue for the MTA. In other words, none of the money is going towards highway infrastructure. Remember, we were just talking about interstate commerce and how the federal highway system is the basis for the federal government to enter into all these issues. Well, because the revenue target is for MTA projects, it means that the tolls are primarily driving the establishment of these toll rates for that purpose only. It's not going to highway users, it's going to commuters who are using these rails. As a result, highway users of the federal aid highway network within this area are burdened with a price that is set to raise certain amounts of revenue for capital projects for public transportation rather than the necessary for it to have an impact on, rather than a price that is necessary to have an impact on congestion. So congestion is not the goal, and reducing congestion is not the goal. Raising money for the MTA is. And for those two reasons, pal, and you get to talk a lot now, that's why the Trump administration has decided not to continue with congestion pricing in the People's Republic of New York City. I know that's a lot, but give me your thoughts.
No, there's all great info. I'm glad I didn't read that, so I'm glad you did. So first of all, let's just start with the goal, right? The goal is never what they say the goal is. Of course, it's to raise revenue for the MTA. If the goal was to reduce congestion, Gene, then wouldn't the money they raise go down month after month because less cars would be going in? It would have the exact opposite effect. They don't want to reduce congestion. They want to raise money, just like when they raise taxes on cigarettes. They're not trying to stop people from smoking. They're trying to raise revenue. They know no one's going to be able to stop smoking. They know people have to drive into Manhattan. They're citing these crazy numbers of like year over year, the amount of cars going into the congestion zone are down. They factor in some COVID numbers. They compare a Sunday in January to a Monday now and vice versa, right? It's all BS numbers. First of all, Governor Hochul, and I said this a few months ago, Gene, before this became a hot topic again. Governor Hochul could have been gracious leading into the election or after Donald Trump won the election and pardoned him for the BS 34 felony convictions. That would have started this administration off on a good footing and on goodwill, right? Good terms with her. She chose not to do that. Those 34 convictions are likely to get overturned during the appeal process. She could have saved a lot of face and started off on good terms with Donald Trump. She chose not to. She deserves exactly what she's going to get. And I love the fact that they wasted a ton of money putting up those cameras, a ton of time putting them up. And now they're going to have to go to court and they're going to have to pay a lot of lawyers and waste a lot of time, just like they did to Donald Trump, which is great. And then lastly, on this topic that I definitely want to throw out there, one mayor named Bill de Blasio, another turd, he was right about something he had said. He had said New York is a tale of two cities, right? You have the very rich and the very poor, and the richer are getting richer and the poorer are getting poorer, and the middle class are jumping ship and fleeing. What do things like $9 to get into Manhattan do? Who's affected by that? It's not the very rich, right? If you have a lot of money and you don't care about paying for parking, which in New York City can cost you $100 a day, what's $9 going to do? Nothing. You're going to drive in. But if you're very poor, you ain't never driving into Manhattan again. It is a tale of two cities, and the Democrats created that mess.
You know what's funny? I remember Hochul's pitch for this reemergence of congestion pricing, which started on the Bloomberg, got kind of shelved there, got shelved under de Blasio, and Hochul kind of brought it up. She made the pitch that this was actually going to be a savings for New Yorkers because instead of paying $15, which is what the MTA recommended be the toll, she got it down to $9. So she gave New Yorkers a savings. Well, aren't we glad about that? The biggest savings is coming from Donald Trump. He's saying no charge, go back in as you please, and man, New Yorkers, I think, are loving it. If you ask Kathy Hochul, though, she thinks that New Yorkers hate what Donald Trump is doing. Even though there are stories, even right now, coming out on the New York Post, talking about New Yorkers rejoicing about the ending of congestion pricing, or at least this attempt from Donald Trump. We're going to get into the arguments in a little bit. But, pal, to me, the biggest harm is to New Yorkers themselves, who are already dealing with high city prices, who are already dealing with inflation. Now all the grocery trucks, all the food trucks going to stock up all the high-end markets are getting charged more to enter, which is going to cause goods to increase. Same thing with all the department stores, all the pharmacies, everything like that. Prices will go up. Businesses will fail. New York, from the pandemic, already had a thinning out of people, not because of deaths from COVID, but because people weren't commuting into the city anymore, thanks to the emergence of remote work. It's been very hard to get people to come back into the city. Property values dropped, high-end leases started to drop, and congestion going into the city already started to drop. Put on top of that this toll, and of course people aren't going to want to come in if they don't have to. That's sort of the point of the new world that we've been living in post-COVID. But if you hear Kathy Hochul and all these advocates from the MTA and all the other far-lefty groups out there that supported this, you would say that, oh my God, it's so much better to breathe in Manhattan. All the asthma is getting better, is being cured automatically. People are still coming back to the city and all. I don't believe it at all. Frankly, I haven't been back to the city since this has taken effect.
Yeah, and I mean, the Democrats, they're insane, bro. They run on a platform of raising your taxes, raising fees, raising tolls. And they're mystified by how on a national level they've been getting blown out as of late, right? And in New York, it's unfortunate that so many Republicans moved away because that's another state that is ripe for the taking with the stupid policy they have. Think about this, Gene. The balls of Kathy Hochul. She wants to force people into overcrowded and unsafe subways. She went on television to say how safe the subways were the day a woman was burned to death. She was lit on fire on the subway in Coney Island. There were police at the station. She got burned alive, right? And Kathy Hochul and the Democrats are trying to push you poor bastards into that failing system. Shame on them.
Absolutely. Speaking of Hochul flipping out, let's get to this press conference that was held at a subway station in the People's Republic of New York City that, by the way, Kathy Hochul was late in attending. I guess she was caught in traffic or something. But let's see what she actually said here. And frankly, it's unhinged, in my opinion. Take a look.
1:01 p.m. today, the U.S. Department of Transportation emailed us a letter from Secretary Duffy announcing their attempt to end the congestion pricing program in the state of New York. At 1:58 p.m., President Donald Trump tweeted, "Long live the king." I'm here to say New York hasn't labored under a king in over 250 years. And we sure as hell are not going to start now.
And by the way, for all of you out there thinking that this is actually real support for Kathy Hochul, all the whooping and hollering and applause, understand that when you have these impromptu press conferences that are really just rallies at the end of the day, they stock the crowd with people that support Kathy Hochul. You know how I know that? because it was once upon a time the job of myself and Ross and others that we know to make sure that we got people to these sort of things in order to support the message that was going to be going out.
But Gene, this is even more horrific. This was not labeled a rally. This was labeled a press conference. So theoretically, the way I took it was those were New York members of the media applauding and cheering for Democrat Kathy Hochul. That's the way I took it, right? You're not supposed to stack the deck with your supporters at a press conference. If this was a rally or a speech, I get it, right? But you're in a public facility holding a press conference.
Well, I guess she wants people to think that, all these strap hangers just happened to be there and they happened to gather around and they happened to listen to Kathy Hochul immediately say this and they were just so happy with Kathy Hochul. It's AstroTurf.
Yeah, and by the way, Gene, I find it rich that she's poking Trump for using the word king. When meanwhile, this lady was Queen Vaccine that was talking to the gods, telling us to take vaccines and mandating them, right? Talk about royalty and we don't labor under a king. She took her and her predecessor, Andrew Cuomo, took dictatorial-like powers while COVID was going on.
Absolutely. By the way, if you're tuning in, you like what you're hearing, please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you're really liking what you're seeing, tell a friend, get them on here on the live chat, or share the show with them. Let them know you want to support Buffoon of the Week Behind Enemy Lines. Let's get back to it.
Streets of the city where battles were fought. We stood up to a king, and we won then. And we will, in case you don't know, New Yorkers, we're in a fight. We do not back down, not now, not ever.
This is a typical press conference, I guess, with people cheering. This does not sound like a press conference at all. It's a rally.
Can I tell you what this sounds like to me, Gene?
What does it sound like to you?
This sounds a little insurrection-y to me.
You know what? It might sound a little insurrection-y, but they're not in D.C. and they're not marching on the Capitol. They're standing in a subway station. But look at all these people. Pal, can you just take a look at the crowd here and tell me what you notice?
It's a bunch of uppity white libs.
Oh, I thought it was just me noticing that.
Oh, no, it's not just you.
Oh, okay. Thanks for that affirmation there, pal. Let's get back to it.
Because who are we fighting for here? We're fighting for our residents, our commuters, our riders, our drivers, our emergency personnel. Life has gotten better for even those who have asthma, people with illness. That's who we're fighting for.
Nah, bitch, you fighting for money. That's what you're fighting for. You're fighting for every single dollar that you want to bilk out of every New Yorker, out of everyone from Long Island, out of everyone from upstate, out of everyone from New Jersey, out of everyone from Connecticut, who dare to cross an imaginary line on your island. That's what you're fighting for here. This is a crowd of people that is cheering on the implementation of a tax.
Yeah. And Gene, explain to me how she's fighting for drivers, right? She's not fighting for drivers. And by the way, this asthma BS that they always talk about, right? First of all, it's arguable whether or not congestion causes asthma. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. But okay, put that aside, right? I won't be a science denier for this show. Let's stipulate that it's true.
Just one time, you're not going to be a science denier. Just one time. I appreciate it.
But where do the cars go? This plan, and this is admitted by the government in New York, this plan pushes cars into the outer boroughs as opposed to the congestion zone in Manhattan. The outer boroughs are where all the minorities live, or most of the minorities live.
Where the real poors are.
Where the real poor people are and the real asthma rates are due to environmental injustice, according to the left, right? So she's not making it better. She's making it worse for the very same people she claims to be helping right now.
And the 6 million people who use the MTA to get to their jobs and their lives and their doctor appointment, nurses, doctors, EMTs, all the people who need to get to their jobs in a reliable way, they're now going to be affected.
She's playing right into Sean Duffy's hands, by the way. We're doing our thing again. We're taking a short clip, making it an hour long. But she's playing into Duffy's hands. That statement right there tells you that this congestion pricing zone, this cordon tolling, is not for dealing with congestion. It's for paying for the MTA. Back to the clip.
So I also have to raise a question. As I look at the pretext for this rejection, and we have a lot of legal reasons why we know we're going to be victorious, but they actually cited the will of New Jersey. New Jersey didn't want this. Ignoring the will, the people who live here, they're elected leaders in Albany, and all of a sudden, the Trump administration is citing, well, New Jersey wasn't happy, okay? I will talk about that later.
And I have that clip as well, but yeah, that's called interstate commerce. That's the basis by which you had to get permission from the federal government to do this sort of cordon tolling through the Federal Highway Administration, through their pilot program, through that VPPP thing. Yeah, people in New Jersey have to be considered in this because the federal government has to grant you permission to do this. You freaking moron.
And Gene, how is the sky falling for getting rid of something that has existed for all of 5 minutes? Right? This thing has been in effect for a few weeks now. She's acting like this was some long-established program where, the Trump administration cut it. It's been in effect for a couple of weeks, as far as I know.
Yeah, about a month or so. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what?
And now EMTs are not going to be able to get to work. How are they getting to work over a month ago?
That's right. By the way, we're going to take a look at the complaint that was filed. I have that as well if you want to get into some of the legalese of it. We can talk about some of the law stuff. Not get too deep, but we'll get into it.
But here's what I want to also say. I don't care if you love congestion pricing or hate it. This is an attack on our sovereign identity, our independence from Washington. And this is... We are a
sovereignty from Washington who granted us permission to do this. She thinks everybody's a fucking moron. Or is she the moron?
Well, since when do Democrats believe in the 10th Amendment? Like, now she believes in states' rights, but when they're pushing DEI and all this other crap, abortion rules, then they don't believe in states' rights, right? Only states' rights when it's something the Democrats want.
Oh, okay. Well, you are a staunch 10th Amendment guy. Is this a 10th Amendment issue?
I don't believe so because of what you cited earlier. Interstate Commerce Clause. That is I'm a big constitutional guy, right? The 10th Amendment only says whatever power it was not granted to Congress, basically under Article 1, Section 8, then it's reserved to the states. In this case, the ability to regulate interstate commerce is a Article 1 clause. It belongs to Congress, the federal government, not the states. You can't do things that affect interstate commerce without permission from the federal government.
And thanks to the Supreme Court, interstate commerce basically means whatever the federal government says it means. Everything and anything is a part of interstate commerce.
Which I hate that, right? Like, it's a very broad Supreme Court view of this, that like school-free gun zones were like justified under interstate commerce for a long time. I think that's BS, right? But this clearly does. If you live in New Jersey and have to go into New York to work, now it's impossible. There is no free option for certain people that are traveling through Lower Manhattan.
Oh, Kathy Hochul talks about New Jersey at length later on as well. I want to get through this clip because then there's a couple of other small ones we got to get to.
We are a nation of states. This is what we fought for. This is what people like Alexander Hamilton and others fought for, to set up a system.
I'm sorry. I got to keep stopping. I think she only knows about Hamilton because there was a musical.
100%.
I think that the idea that we are a nation of states is the funniest thing coming from a Democrat, because I don't think that any of them believe in federalism. I think they just believe that the federal government should run everything unless you are holding an office somewhere else, in which case you should be running everything from that office. The hypocrisy is just, it's got me hot. It's got me angry. I'm going to start cursing.
Rich white male slave owners. Like, what? All of a sudden now they're going to start quoting the founding? Come on.
We are not subservient to a king or anyone else out of Washington. So this is the fight we're in. It's all about our sovereignty. And I spoke.
By the way, Sovereignty will be a t-shirt
Sovereignty.
up on shop.buffoonoftheweek.com probably by Friday. We're going to create a Sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
It's going to be a picture of Kathy Hochul saying Sovereignty.
I mean, that was like, that just shows you she's not very familiar with the word, period.
Spoke to the president many times in a reasonable way, calm way. You're a New Yorker. You know how essential it is to have safe, reliable public transit, or else this system shuts down. Our economy shuts down. The nation's economy could shut down. That's how essential we are. And one would think he would know that.
Bitch, it's the same state that tried to put him in jail. It's the same state that tried to trump up 34 charges that you said earlier are going to be most likely overturned. I agree with that legal opinion as well. And you did nothing about it. So now you're going to come crying to him now that he's president of the United States and appeal to him as a New Yorker? Where were you when New York was basically creating a lynch mob daily outside Manhattan criminal court to try to get Donald Trump, who knows why? I'm not going to say the word on YouTube or social media, but you know the word I'm thinking of. I'm sorry, you're actually going to go down this line? Talk about the height of hypocrisy.
Yeah, and Jean, she talks about the necessity for safe and reliable public transportation. First of all, half the people riding the buses and trains don't even pay. They just jump the turnstile or go on the bus and nothing happens to them, right? But bitch, you're in charge. You need to create safe and reliable public transportation. When Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York, he had safe and reliable subways. He didn't have congestion pricing to do it. He utilized his powers as mayor to make the NYPD patrol the subways and lock up criminals and fare beaters, right? The quality of life crimes, the broken windows theory, right? She's going to solve these problems by throwing more money out of it. And whose money is she throwing out of it? She's taking out of your pockets. $9 every time you go to Manhattan. This is insanity.
It's absolute insanity. And you know what the problem is, pal? She's run out of pockets to pick in New York. So she's got to pick other people's pockets now at this point. And she needs to keep the federal government gravy train coming. And with Trump being there now, it's not likely to keep going the way that she wants to.
And then you have others involved. I mean, it feels like the commuters of our city and our region are now the roadkill on Donald Trump's revenge tour against New York. And I have to say this to Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy. It's not the real world, Sean. It's real life for New Yorkers, and don't you forget that.
So we're going to end it here, but you get what she's doing. She's a lot of talking to badge right now. She doesn't really have, she doesn't have the intelligence to bring out the legal arguments. And her lawyer that was there with him, with this crowd, didn't want to talk about it in front of the crowd because it can get hyper technical. But all she has is lines about kings and Sean Duffy, who was on a reality TV show, and his wife was also on a reality TV show as well on MTV. That's what she's got. The outrage of people and no real substance whatsoever.
What's your gut telling you, Gene? If she goes to court, what's going to happen?
I'm so glad you asked, and let me just see if I have a banner for this. But before we get to the court filing, I do need to do some of the grift here and say thank you guys for watching the channel. I'm Gene, he's Ross. We are behind enemy lines, and while we got a good amount of you here on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, watching us right now live, I'm going to ask you guys to please subscribe to the channel wherever you're watching, follow wherever you're watching, whatever social media platform you're on, do what they tell you to do. Then also go onto YouTube and go onto Rumble and cross-pollinate here. Support the channel as best you can. You can check us out at buffoonoftheweek.com, where our website is pumping out content. And also, if you want to, on YouTube, there's a store tab. You can check out some merch. We talked about that earlier. There's going to be some new merch. Shop.buffoonoftheweek.com as well if you want to check out our merch items here in addition to all that good stuff. So let's get back to Hochul flipping out here. I'm going to add to the screen right now the causes of action that we're going to be discussing coming from New York State. Now, I went through all the factual allegations, and it's a long recitation about the history of congestion pricing, but let's get to the actual causes of action. Now, typically when I write a complaint, I like to put my best foot forward in causes of action, put my strongest one first. So the first one here is a violation of the Administrative Procedure Act, basically a violation of administrative law, claiming that the government acted arbitrarily and capriciously in terminating this VPPP agreement that allowed New York City to create this cordon tolling in southern Manhattan. So the acts of all federal branch officers must be justified by some law, and in case an official violates the law to the injury of an individual, the court generally have jurisdiction to grant relief. So that's your invocation of jurisdiction. Under the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, a court must, quote, hold unlawful and set aside agency action, findings, and conclusions found to be contrary to constitutional right, power, privilege, or immunity, or in excess of statutory jurisdiction, authority, or limitations, or short of statutory right. So that's sort of the statutory standard there. The argument from the state of New York in this case for the first cause of action is that the federal government is not authorized by any law, statute, or constitution or otherwise to unilaterally terminate a VPPP agreement contrary to its terms. The VPPP agreement is a valid agreement currently in effect, supported by consideration and subject to considerable reliance interests. My argument against this is that the letter from Secretary Duffy states that New York State would be in violation of the VPPP agreement because of their stated intent for the proceeds from this congestion pricing to go towards public transportation infrastructure rather than highway infrastructure. And therefore, they're held in breach, and the agreement is broken, and they can order New York State to stop it. It goes on to say that there's no provision authorizing the Federal Highway Administration to terminate the agreement, or and authorizes the Secretary to enter into agreements to establish, maintain, and monitor value pricing pilot programs. And that's what Secretary Duffy here is doing. He's monitoring the program. In his monitoring of the program, he sees the funds not going where they should be going pursuant to congressional intent in establishing this pilot program. VPPP does not include any provision authorizing a Federal Highway Division to terminate the agreement, but common law does allow you to terminate when there is a breach. In addition, an executive officer acts ultra vires, which means outside the scope of their representation, outside the scope of their authority, I should say, where it deprives a contractor of a right expressly or implied granted by another statute. They're going to argue that as well. The standard also that they go through this is in other causes of action is that the government has no legitimate reason to cancel this contract. And because Donald Trump was talking with Nicole Malliotakis in the People's Republic of New York about getting rid of congestion pricing, and because this has been an agenda point that he's always intended to do as part of his campaign and promising to do so, that the government is acting arbitrarily and capriciously. You see here, paragraph 131, defendants have no authority to terminate or rescind the authority to operate the program. Therefore, defendants have acted contrary to law, and the challenged action is arbitrary and capricious and must be declared unlawful. Secretary Duffy's letter sort of nullifies that idea of arbitrary and capricious, in my opinion, because he has real valid reasons, not only about the issuance of the agreement itself, but the execution of the agreement in not giving a no toll free option and directing the money to go towards the MTA. The other causes of action sort of flow from that. We talked about ultra virus already. They're basically saying that Duffy doesn't have the authority to do what he's doing. Procedural, arbitrary, and capricious. In other words, there's violations of procedural due process, and they also argue substantive due process, saying that they didn't have an opportunity to petition the federal government to explain why their decision should not go forward. There was no hearing. There was no opposition voice allowed in the process, and therefore it's a violation of the Constitution. I'm just going to thumb through the causes of action, pal, but give me your initial thoughts on what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, that's like great legalese and a great legal strategy. I look at it even from a higher level, I guess, maybe not as legal, but the power to hire implies the power to fire. The power to approve implies the power to terminate an agreement. Right? This is not really like a contract. Congress did not specify that New York can do this. Congress delegated the authority to approve this program with some entity of the federal government. That entity of the federal government is now the Trump administration's government, right? So to me, the power to approve it implies the power to terminate it. So be it.
Well, let's talk about basic contract law for a second here. And I'm sorry I'm getting so wonky into this, but this is sort of my stock in trade. A contract normally tells you how it should be terminated on a certain date, upon certain actions, upon agreement of the parties. It's usually in the contract. So without seeing this VPPP agreement, I can't exactly tell you how the contract should terminate. But I can tell you that a termination is different than a breach. We've been talking about breach of contract here by what Secretary Duffy put into his letter. I think that takes it out of the realm of improper termination that's been alleged here into a different realm, and that is to determine whether or not the state of New York breached the VPPP agreement in directing funds to go towards public transportation and for not having a no toll-free alternative involved. Also, as I'm skimming through the causes of action here, there is a violation of the National Environmental Policy Act and the Administrative Procedures Act. So they're saying at the time of the termination, the National Environmental Policy Act process for the program was complete, and there was no major federal action remaining to occur with respect to the program. So they're basically saying that everything was done, the transaction was completed, and it was being implemented pursuant to the agreement. And the National Environmental Protection Act required the federal government to prepare an environmental impact study for that. The federal government apparently didn't do that, probably under the Biden administration. I'm just reading and skimming here quickly. And because they snoozed, they lose. I think that's what they're saying here. Here it is, paragraph 177. Defendants failed to undertake any NEPA review of their decision to terminate the VPPP agreement. In other words, they're saying that there had to be an environmental impact study done in order to terminate the agreement. But again, I think the argument about breach sort of distinguishes what the federal government did from what Kathy Hochul is saying that was done here. And I think that's enough legalese for now because I'm getting a little dizzy and my eyes are crossed. But I'm sure our audience is as well here.
Yeah, I just want to throw in one more arrow at this. So on a constitutional level, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I get upset when we all just agree that the courts are the arbiters of what is constitutional and what's not, right? Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the courts have that responsibility. All three branches of government actually have that responsibility. That is why the president takes an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. If the executive branch decides that this is unconstitutional, in my view, non-lawyer Ross Galloway, they also have the ability to nullify an agreement that they view as unconstitutional, right? Sue me. I don't care. But the federal government, the executive branch, Congress sure does too. And I'll end on this, Gene. Nothing upsets me more than when Congress passes something and they say things like, because I see this on TV all the time, Republicans say it too. Well, we'll let it get to the courts and they'll decide whether or not this act is constitutional or not. No, that's not the way it works, dude. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. Each branch of government has to figure out what is constitutional and what's not, and maybe the courts are the final arbiter of it. But in this case, to me, if Trump and his team say, you know what, this is violating interstate commerce, we deem this to be unconstitutional, to me, that's good enough. No court case needed. Sue me.
Well, I think there's a lot of arrows in the quiver here, right? I think that's one of them. The second one being New York State breached the contract, and therefore the contract is now a nullity. And the third one being that the government didn't act in an arbitrary or capricious manner because Secretary Duffy issued a statement to New York City and New York State to let them know why the agreement is terminated. There are well thought out reasons there, even if Kathy Hochul thinks they're weak legal arguments or whatever. And I think the arbitrary and capricious standard, I don't think they're going to make that standard. But listen, I've been wrong before about this sort of legal analysis. I've gone to court thinking I've had rock solid arguments and lost. I've gone to court where I've had flimsy arguments and pulled a rabbit out of my hat. So we'll see what happens. By the way, this lawsuit is in the Southern District of New York, which includes Brooklyn and includes there's a courthouse in Brooklyn. There's a courthouse out by me in Suffolk County as well in Islip. I don't know what judge is going to get assigned or where they're going to go to. And never discount the fact that you're dealing with judges in the People's Republic of New York, whether they're on the federal bench or not. You're always got a 50-50 shot of getting a good judge or a crappy judge. But in that respect also, it eventually goes up to SCOTUS anyway, and I think that's where we're going to be heading in the months and maybe even over a year to come. In the meantime, Kathy Hochul says the cameras stay on and New Yorkers keep on paying the freight. You get the last thought on this topic, pal.
Yeah, listen, I can't wait. Let's keep Big Tish James busy in court for the next couple of years, going all the way to the Supreme Court. Let's go.
Oh, believe it or not, they actually pawned this off on the MTA attorneys, not on the Attorney General. Just a little note there.
Surprise.
There's another issue involving Kathy Hochul that I know that you, sir, wanted to talk about because it's near and dear to your New York roots. And it involves the state government and Kathy Hochul's response to a New York State prison guard strike. We have this news report from WROC upstate. I believe it's up in Rockland. I'm not sure. But here's the reporting from WROC.
It's about safety. It's about keeping our guys safe. It's about letting our employees see the families. They're being mandated 24-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, and that's before this started.
David Washburn tells me he spent more than 2 decades as a corrections officer working here at the Groveland facility until last summer. He describes some of the working conditions he endured before he claims he was pushed out into retirement due to the new status quo.
It was constant mandates. We were responding to medical emergencies all the time for inmate overdoses. It's a daily thing. Violence has increased tremendously over the last couple of years. This year, there was a record assault on staff and assault on inmates. It's not safe for anybody behind these fences.
The strike, not sanctioned by the CO's own union, calls for the reversal of the HALT Act, which loosens solitary confinement. They also want incoming mail to be scanned and sent digitally to inmates, plus mandated body scans for visitors, and a $5,000 hiring bonus for new employees, and no overtime mandates over 16 hours of work. State law prohibits public workers such as teachers, firefighters, and corrections officers from going on strike because they provide critical services. Meantime, Trina Albright brought her 3 children to the strike Tuesday in support of her husband and their family.
He works 60 to 90 hours every single week. We don't know if he's going to walk out of the jail or if he's going to roll out on a hospital stretcher. It's extremely scary. My kids cry, "Is Daddy coming home?" They wake up in the morning and he's already gone. They don't see my husband, their dad, for 3 to 4 days straight at a time. And this is not just like a once-off thing. This is all the time, weekly.
Well, there's no necessarily definitive plan in terms of the next steps. I talked with some of these folks who told me they're planning to be here all night. They're taking rotating shifts, warming up in cars, of course, things of that nature. But they do have representatives here, and they're saying until the state can come to the table and make some promises about what changes are going to happen.
Now, I'm going to let you take the floor, Mr. Galloway, and explain Kathy Hochul's response to this strike.
Well, real quick, and I will touch on the response because it's hilarious. I once, in a previous life, worked in some jail facilities. I was not behind the bars per se. I was behind the wall, but not behind the bars. And I had a senior, supervisor, correctional officer once say, "No one wants to clean the toilet, but try living without one." And that's what he described like being a correctional officer. Those guys have the toughest job in the world. Everyone says police, firemen. I get it. Those are tough jobs too. But a correctional officer is unarmed. They're locked in there with 100 plus inmates, 1 to 2 COs. If you're lucky, you have 2. A lot of times you have 1 and you're unarmed. They took away solitary confinement. Those New York State correction officers, their top pay after like 7, 8, 9 years is somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000 a year. They're not making a lot of money. They're not like the Nassau police where you're making $150,000 a year. They're making crap, and they're stuck in there 16 plus hours a day. Do you know how dangerous it is to be locked with Bloods and Crips and murderers and rapists for 16 plus hours a day? You know how exhausted you are? You know how hard it is to stay awake? I know we all laughed about the Jeffrey Epstein federal correctional officers falling asleep on the job. I totally could see it. It's so hard to stay awake when you're forced to be in there for so many hours a day. What's her response? Her response is to send in the National Guard. Those poor bastards in the New York State National Guard, they were called for, to go overseas to the forever wars. They were called for COVID. They were called for the immigration, migration, illegal immigration, Mayor Adams debacle in New York City, and now they're going to be deployed in the prison system in New York State. They are completely untrained for that, completely unprepared for it. This is going to be a disaster. I don't normally support work actions like this, but I got to tell you, the correction officers, both at the city and state level in New York specifically, have been shitted on for far too long, and I'm glad they're doing this to call attention to the problem that they have.
And before people start asking about, well, why would a right of center show care about a prison guard strike in upstate New York? There's a couple of reasons for me. The first one being, this is a show that talks about political buffoonery, and we like to highlight hypocrisy. Let's talk about the hypocrisy of Kathy Hochul decrying the Trump administration, who, among other things, is sending, active duty soldiers to the southern border, and everyone's having a conniption fit about that. But meanwhile, Kathy Hochul is sending the National Guard into quote-unquote secure prisons in New York via an executive order. Let's get into the story. This is from NBC News here. I want to make sure that everybody understands exactly what's going on here. So Hochul signed an executive order today, dispatching the National Guard to New York State prisons where corrections officers are holding unauthorized strikes. The order issued to guarantee public order and protection of public property at the facilities, and it also allows corrections officers who are showing up to work to receive overtime pay. Well, that's the least you can do when you haven't on work 24-hour shifts. These disruptive and unsanctioned work stoppages by some correction officers must end, as they are jeopardizing the safety of their colleagues, the prison population, and causing undue fear for the residents in the surrounding community. I gotta say it again. Bitch, you're doing that by allowing for 24-hour shifts, 60, 90-hour work weeks with short-staffed prisons, and then to have the starting salary be such a disincentive for people to actually sign up for working in these places. This is another New York State caused and created problem by Kathy Hochul. Am I over the target, pal?
You're 100% over the target. And when there's an assault on staff, they are rarely prosecuted. You're supposed to be charged with a new crime if you assault another inmate or a staff member, right? One of the ways they used to handle it in-house was with something solitary confinement, right? Or a special housing unit where you're locked up 23 hours a day until you get your mind right or lose it, whatever. You're locked up. You don't have rights anymore. But New York and a lot of liberal places have gotten rid of that. So an inmate today assaults a staff member or another inmate, and then nothing happens to them. A lot of times they stay in the same housing unit. Sometimes they get transferred to a different housing unit, but it doesn't matter. This is a disruptive person who clearly cannot live in society. One more thing on the prison system, Gene. A lot of people watch TV and they just think like you're locked in a jail cell. Inmates in state prisons and the city jail on Rikers Island spend the majority of their time outside of their cell in common areas. They're not locked up. The only people who are really locked up are the ones that used to go to the special housing units or solitary confinement. So if you're out of your cell for the majority of the day and a housing unit can have over 100 inmates on it, it is an extraordinarily dangerous job. These correction officers are right. What are they asking for? Better pay, a safer work environment, and not to work 16 plus hours a day. Like, I don't see what they're asking for is unreasonable here.
No, I get that. And this is a situation where you look at some union action and you're looking at demands that are given. And a lot of times in modern times, the past generation or so, those demands are pretty much extraneous beyond the basics that was the basis for creating unions. Basic safety, basic human dignity, and proper working conditions. That's what unions were created to do. These officers are looking for the basics, and Kathy Hochul is punishing them. And not only punishing them, but making an untenable situation even less safe by having 3,500 National Guardsmen and women going into these places. And look, the New York National Guard, they're some of the best guard in the country, at least in my opinion. And I'm going to throw that out there because I know a couple of them that were not only enlisted but also officers, and really, really, really good people and good soldiers as well. I don't think they were equipped to manage this situation and haven't been trained to deal with this situation. There's already a shorthandedness with these prison guards. Anyway, those people who know what they're getting into are telling you and screaming that we need help, and in response, you're calling the National Guard. And yet, when Donald Trump does the same thing for the southern border, Democrats like Kathy Hochul lose their ever-loving shit.
Yeah, why doesn't she call social workers instead of calling in the military?
Absolutely.
Right? By implication, she's admitting that is an extraordinarily dangerous job, right? The only people she can call is the military to try and help out. Meanwhile, when they talk out of the other side of their face, like you were mentioning, when President Trump says he wants to use the military to transport criminal illegal aliens out of the country on military transport flights or house them at Guantanamo Bay, he's a dictator, right? But what's the difference here? She's used, dare I say, the Democrats once again under Kathy Hochul are unleashing the American military on American civilians once again.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anything more that needs to be said there. I think people can understand the basics. Just want to check this one banner here. Oh, that was from last show. You know what, pal? We did a lot of work today. I feel accomplished. I feel like we conveyed a lot of information. I feel like we gave a lot of facts that weren't really out there in the mainstream about this litigation over congestion pricing. It's pretty cool. And I think it's time to put a big old bow on this show, sort of wrap it up. It's final thought time. I'm going to let you go first because I think I know where you're going, and I'm just waiting for the comment section to pick up on it once the show is broadcast. So go ahead.
I'm going to steer completely away from what we've been talking about.
Oh, and by the way, if you have any visuals you wanted me to put up, just let me know.
I don't know if you have those two things I sent you earlier, but
I don't know if I can put them up. You know what? I might be able to do it if I do the thing I did last time. I think. No, I don't think I can. But give it a shot, and I'll see if I can get it.
Right. So I'm sure everyone's tracking. A plane somehow landed upside down in Toronto, a Delta Airlines flight from one of their carriers. Those of you guys that remember, Captain Sully, who landed on the Hudson after his plane struck some birds when he took off out of New York, couldn't make it to Teterboro, New Jersey, landed on the Hudson River, and everybody survived. That man was doing interviews like within 24 hours, he was hailed as a hero. Plane lands upside down in Canada, and miraculously, everyone survives. But days go by, and there's no interviews or mention of the pilots. And I wonder why. Well, I think I know why. Turns out that the pilot was a newly certified female pilot. Now, is that bad in and of itself? If you ask me, yes. But for the average person, first of all, anybody who disagrees with that, go ahead and get on a plane and see two pilots sitting in the cockpit and they're both young females. Tell me you don't feel a little unsafe, okay? You want that old white dude with the steady hand in there flying, maybe even taking a shot of whiskey before the plane takes off. Don't tell me you think otherwise, right? But the same thing, Delta Airlines last year, or it was late 2022, was tweeting out, pridefully boasting about unmanned flights with pictures of all female crews, the flight attendants and the pilots, right? touting their DEI stance about hiring females and putting an emphasis on hiring female pilots. And now a female pilot lands a plane and it lands upside down in Toronto. And where is she? Right? She survived. Why are they not hailing her as a hero? Right? Because I don't think, and I don't care that the investigation hasn't happened yet. I don't think there was anything that caused that to happen other than pilot error. Clip this, Gene. I'm telling you, I'm going to be right on this one.
I'm making sure you get your photo up here. Here's the tweet from Endeavor Air. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. Your flight is unmanned today. That's the one you were talking about, right?
That is the one I'm talking about. Proud that they're not hiring men. They're only hiring women. Does that make you feel safer on your flight? If you walked in and that was in the cockpit, you feel okay? Gene?
Hang on. I think you need to see this one. I hope the screen changes. Hang on. Fixed it.
Brilliant.
These motherfuckers online, man.
Right? How it started, how it's going.
Yeah. End Wokeness on X said, broke the glass ceiling. Literally. Good Lord. Oh, God. Let me get this off the screen before I get sued or canceled or something. My final thought, I had a couple of them. But I think this one photo is going to speak it for me. This is a picture that has been circulating the interwebs. It's a photo of, I believe it is a Chinese Communist Party sponsored event in the People's Republic of New York City. And the Grand Marshal, wearing a sash that goes along with all of the other Grand Marshals from the CCP or CCP affiliated people, is one Chuck Schumer. We've been talking about how the left has gone really around the bend and how there's this idea that there are Democrats, liberals, and leftists, or at least that was my idea about it. I'm here to apologize. I guess I had it wrong, because those who I thought were Democrats or thought maybe were liberals end up being leftists that are bought and paid by organizations like this. I'm sure Chuck Schumer got a nice donation to his cause, maybe to his housekeeping account that you can't check, maybe to a campaign account, maybe to a larger pool of money that will go out to other Democrats that he maybe bundle a fundraise for. And this is where it's coming from. So I guess because of this photo, I have to start rethinking my worldview when it comes to Democrats, liberals, and leftists, and determine whether or not it's only the leftists we know, the leftists we think we know, or the leftists that are hiding everything from us until the mask totally falls off. It's not as elaborate as yours, pal. There wasn't as much art as yours, but that's my final thought on this whole situation.
It's only a matter of time, Gene.
I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong, pal. I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong.
It's only a matter of time before they find a Chinese spy is working for Chuck Schumer, just like they did with several other high-ranking Democrats in New York. Only a matter of time.
I'm just wondering who's going to be the next one in line to take the place of Chuck Schumer when he goes the way of the dodo. SportsWire checking in at the very end of the show saying, what up? We appreciate you tuning in. But you came at the end of the show, my man, because as we do after every show, it is time to shut this sucker down. What do you say, pal?
As long as it don't cost me $9, shut it down.
Hey, listen, I get to put up the sign that says 1 week since our last incident on the show here. I'm proudly displaying that sucker later.
Knock on wood.
Hey, it's right there.
Oh, no, it's going to go down.
Yeah, whoa, calm down. Oh, you son of a bitch. All right. So everybody tuning in, wherever you're watching on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, thanks for joining us. Make sure you like and share the show with your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell wherever you are so you don't miss other shows. From the People's Republic of New York City, Gene and Ross behind enemy lines. We are out of here. Now play our motherfucking anthem.
Not without electro.
Go fuck yourself. Is that clear?
way. Conservative battalions walking them out, marching through the streets while the buffoons all shout. Move in the shadows, flag on my chest, repping my clan, putting faith to the test. Cause let's make blues behind enemy lines, fighting for the truth, feels like wartime. Don't back down, keep it rugged and raw, cool in the chaos, but loud in the roar. But loud in the roar. Heavy tread and thunder, arm in advance, march to the anthem, this is our chance. If I ever stand with a smirk in a gaze, holding down the fort in this Democrat cage. Strategies unfold, allies on scene, but bonds remain bold. Commitment to the cause in the heart of the storms. In the name of freedom, we're breaking the norm. Cause let's stay blues behind enemy lines, fighting for the truth, feels like wartime. Don't back down, keep it rugged and raw, cool in the chaos, but loud in this war. But loud in this war. Truth feels like wartime. Don't back down, keep it rugged and raw. Cool in the chaos, but loud.